Happy Friday, and I hope it's a great one for you. And I'm glad you're here with me and you've come on into my little world for a minute or two. As Paul wrote some of the last words that he wrote in the scriptures, 2 Timothy chapter 4, some of it's pretty exciting, some of it's almost depressing. But there's a message, I think, that's in it. Especially verse 10 always stands out in my mind as he mentions one of his fellow workers by the name of Demas. There's mentioned another place or two. But in this case, he says in verse 10, Demas has left me, having loved this present world. He's in the midst of talking about where different ones have gone to different places, but that's the only one that he mentions has left me. Some have gone to different places, maybe to do some work, but Demas has left me because of his love for the present world. Maybe he feared for his life. That's possible. Maybe he just got tired, wanted to get into other things, whatever it was. He's left me. Kind of a sad statement, one of the saddest in scriptures, I think. I want you to think about something, though, and that idea of simply, I said I would, didn't I? When word meant something, when we said we would and we just truly meant we would do it, whatever it was, even when it cost more than you thought it would, you went ahead and did it anyway. A number of years ago, I received a telephone call from a local funeral home. It happened occasionally and still does once in a while. But got a call, it's probably about 30 years ago, I received a call from a local funeral home. They said, we've got a man who's passed away and he's asked for a preacher of a certain persuasion to come and share. I wonder if you would be available and willing to come and be the preacher and officiate at this funeral service. And I said, when is it? And he gave me the time. I said, I could do that. I'd be glad to. They said, we really don't have much information on him, but we've got a telephone number of a nephew or niece. I can't remember for sure. I think it was a nephew. And if you would like to give a call, you can find out a little information. I said, I like that. And so I called, and I had one of the most interesting telephone calls I've had in some time. And I believe it was a niece after all. Anyway, she told me a little bit about him. The man, and I wish I could remember his name. I could look it up in my files, but his name really doesn't matter right now. I want you to know something about him. He was an Air Force colonel. He'd flown around the world. He'd been to a lot of places. Military had been his life, and he and his wife had lived that life. They hadn't had any children. I didn't ask any questions about that, but they had lived together. They traveled so many places in the world because of his duties, but they had ended up, and his military duty had almost always come at the forefront of everything they did. Whenever the military said, you go, and so forth and so on. Many of you understand exactly what I'm saying. But the time finally came, and they were devoted to each other. The time finally came for him to retire. And they sat down and they made their plans and they thought about the things that they would do and the places they would go just for pleasure, no longer because they were being moved by the military, but things that they had not seen, places that they would go. And the time came for him to retire, and just about the time he retired, before they could really enact some of their plans, she began to be ill. Doctors became more important than where they would travel and what they would see. Unfortunately, her situation just went from bad to worse. She became an invalid. She got to where she could do almost nothing for herself. I didn't ask for the details of what her ailment was, but he took care of her night and day. Whatever her need was, he took care of her. He stayed at home. He watched after her. And the only time that he would leave her alone was when he would go to a doctor's appointment or to get a haircut, or sometimes to the grocery store. And quite often he would get someone else to go to the grocery store for them so that he didn't have to leave. Night and day, he bathed her, he changed her, he fed her. He was devoted to her and by her side. His niece said once in a great while she would be the one that he would call to come and stay with his wife while he went and got his haircut or whatever it was he needed to do on that occasion. Finally, she did die. After many years, she died. And he was brokenhearted about it. But you would think that then he would think about what lay ahead. But almost 6 months later, after a very brief illness, he too died. Of course, he was an older gentleman, not that old, but an older gentleman, and he did too die. And that's why I was called in. But I thought so much about this and what an example it was. For so many people make a pledge to be something, to do something. And I thought about how many couples I've tied the wedding knot. And how many have stood right in front of me and in front of a crowd and said, "Till death do us part." But it's not just marriages. It's business. It's friends. It's saying, "I'll be there. I'll do this. I'll take care of that for you." And then something else comes along and it's pulled away, whether it's marriage, whether it's business, whatever it might be. But there's the thought. And in this old retired Air Force colonel was the thing I said I would, didn't I? And so I want to offer to you the thought. Here we are with the opportunity to hold our word forward. Let your word be what it is, regardless. Stand up for what you believe is right. Be the example of the one who's, when you said, "I said I would, didn't I?" that you went all the way. What a great message for a Friday. I hope it's one that inspires you a little bit in an old Air Force colonel and the willingness to do what he said he would. Hey, we'll share more things in the coming days. I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. See you later.